The classroom is the most important place in the education system. In order to learn, children need a calm and purposeful classroom atmosphere.
Oh, great. Toys, is it? Just put them away.
Teachers must be able to keep order. If they can't, all the children in their charge will suffer.
And you, sit down now. What? You should have gone to toilet during break.
The central problem of disruption could be significantly reduced by helping teachers become more effective classroom managers.
What we're concentrating on here is the quality of the pattern, and we explored this idea of texture in Year 8, didn't we, when we were looking at the trees. Each tree, each bit of the view through the window was drawn...
Inevitably, the presence of a film crew in the classroom affects what happens there.
What we're looking for with the lino print. You need
The children tend to be quieter.
solid lines. Okay,
The teacher may be nervous.
On each of your tables, would you be
At the same time, the camera can only see a section of the classroom and an even smaller proportion of what's going on.
If you've got any missing, you can come and look.
Showing a close-up may exaggerate its importance.
Just what's the joke then, Ben? Nothing, miss. Well, it seems highly amusing to be nothing. Not making progress.
In this programme, we've included a number of improvised scenes to illustrate various points.
Right, Connor.
And these are indicated as such.
Energy into your work as you do to your chat and your humour. You might see some more results, Yeah, miss.
I'm always a manager in every classroom, and most of the time I'd say I'm a people manager, because you're dealing with different personalities every single minute of the day. And also because of the restrictions of the timetable, I suppose I'm a time manager as well, because within that 50-minute period, I'm having to set a goal and making sure that goal is achieved.
If I do think of myself as a manager, it's more as a football manager than what I would think of as an office or business manager. I think one of the problems with the teaching profession is in a bid to gain professional status, they've taken on the jargon of business.
I think certainly teaching art and design, one has to be an effective manager. You're dealing with an awful lot of equipment and materials, and it's very important to keep one step ahead of the children.
In the sense that I've got control over the classroom and what goes on inside it, yes. But it's very difficult to define what a manager actually is and what a manager does.
Excuse me a moment.
Pat Hargreaves is a deputy head of Rains Park High School in South London.
Thank you, thank you. Teachers don't have a great deal of opportunity to be reflective from their own practice. OK, what's going to get the car going in the first place? Their day is so action-packed from the moment they arrive in school until they leave, and then still, if they're working at home, they're still sort of catching up on themselves, preparing ahead.
In the spring term of 1992, she ran a 6-week course on positive teaching for a group of 12 members of staff.
Come from here. It's a good way of improving children's on-task behaviour and therefore the effectiveness of the education that we can give them. A lot of staff have been interested in classroom management since the school changed into a mixed comprehensive school. And as a result of that, I think that this was one way in which to look at the social side of classroom behaviour and to improve on-task behaviour from that point of view.
I think it's easy to get complacent in your teaching. If you teach the same subject in the same area and you do it year after year, there's a danger that you can think everything's going fine. Something like positive teaching makes you look at yourself, and it makes you realise perhaps that when you think you've got an ideal situation in the class, you might not have.
What attracted me to the positive teaching thing is the onus on trying to get down to a more one-to-one relationship with the kids. I try to do that, but I'm very aware that more often than not my one-to-one relationships are when I'm telling kids off. When you've got a change, you can stop.
While it's certainly true that what works for one teacher doesn't always work for another, research suggests that effective teachers behave in similar ways to each other.
Not too sure you should actually both use the same mouthpiece. Okay,
They demonstrate similar skills and have similar priorities.
I think this is the only bench that doesn't manage to get water all over the place. Well done.
They interact with their class in similar ways.
Good. Good. Anybody else still got problems with it?
So how might we characterise an effective classroom manager?
I've got a spare set here. Try that. I just happened to have done earlier.
Here are some thoughts which were included in the Elton report. For example, it may not always be possible to arrive at a lesson before the pupils, but the advantages of so doing are considerable.
Want to come to my party on Saturday?
Very good homework, Michaela, well done. Good analysis of the...
Effective teachers control the way pupils enter the room, with reminders about classroom rules if necessary.
Coats off as soon as you get in, please, and bags under the desk, remember?
We're going to continue from what we did last time. It's quite an important part of the course.
The effective teacher looks confident and sounds confident. His or her authority in the classroom is conveyed by posture, gesture, and the tone and pitch of voice. In fact, by a whole range of non-verbal signals which pupils are well able to interpret.
Clearly. Well done, Sarah.
I've taken the liberty of removing 25 verbs from Ted Hughes's poem.
Interruptions can cause havoc, even in the best planned classrooms. The effective teacher always tries to minimise their impact.
3 types of verb, which we did last lesson. That means you may put in a descriptive verb, which tells you something about the way the action is done, or an onomatopoeia, or a metaphor.
Traditionally, teachers have always had eyes in the backs of their heads.
No, what are you doing this weekend? That's not what you doing. Can't wait, Scott.
Keeping pupils on task and the momentum of the lesson going requires careful planning and a display of with-itness.
Go away.
Now, I realise, Lorraine, that you are very interested in these sheets, but I think the best thing to do is just write rather than talk, OK? So let Tina concentrate on her sheets.
Pupils often misbehave when they've completed their work and have nothing to do. Making sure that pupils know what to do next is very important.
Now, those of you who are coming to the end of stage 1, if you look on the blackboard, you'll find the information for the next step.
Right, there are 6 of each. Lee of
The effective teacher makes use of all the resources available, but managing these resources can become a job in itself unless there's a good deal of delegation.
And if you could both collect them in at the end of the lesson, please. Thank you.
The effective manager is aware of the environmental factors which affect behaviour in the classroom. Is it too hot or too cold? Is the sun streaming through the window, preventing pupils from seeing the board?
Holly, would you like to open that window? It'll save us all going to sleep, won't it?
The sort of verbs I don't want you to use are very general verbs.
The effective teacher moves freely about the room, making use of the space. This is the teacher's room, and moving around underlines the
Your
fact.
hands, please, and give me an example of one of those general verbs. Matthew.
Whisper.
Whisper, well done. That's an onomatopoeia as well, isn't it? Put your hands up, give me an example of a very general verb.
The effective teacher constantly scans the class, making eye contact with as many pupils as possible.
Can somebody give me an example of an alternative for that verb?
There are no no-go areas. The effective teacher is able to move right into the pupils' territory if necessary. It's this ability to observe the classroom, to anticipate misbehaviour and deal with it before it escalates, that is a hallmark of effective classroom management.
Mutter, good.
Teachers get most annoyed when it's not just really talking to someone else, when you're talking loud so that everyone else in the class gets put off as well.
People not settling down on purpose and not taking their coats off when they know that they should have to take their coats off.
Deliberately stress out the teachers, wind them up, turn their words around to make them not make sense.
Being noisy and disruptive when the teacher tells you to be quiet.
Or shouting out or being lippy if you keep answering back to teachers.
Coming back for books out of your lockers in the classroom when you know you're not supposed to do it.
Some teachers are like really nervous and can't control the classes.
Because if the teacher sort of like can't control you, then you know you can get away with it.
The skills of classroom management haven't always been communicated to new arrivals in the teaching profession. Until recently, teaching has been practiced in relative isolation. A high degree of reticence has ensured that help hasn't always been available to colleagues experiencing difficulties. Confronted by a rowdy classroom, staff have sometimes been reluctant to intervene for fear of appearing to question a colleague's competence. In the late 1980s, concern about discipline in schools led to the publication of the Elton Report. This pointed out that the major problem which many teachers found so exhausting was not violence and intimidation in the classroom, but trivial and persistent misbehaviour. The author of the research on which this observation is based is Dr. Frank Merritt of Birmingham University.
We think that it is in fact paying attention to a much more important component of our message, that is positiveness.
Together with his colleague Kevin Weldall, Frank Merritt has designed the Positive Teaching course which Pat Hargreaves intends to use in her school. Dr. Merritt has identified two sorts of classroom misbehaviour with which the course attempts to deal.
The behaviours that trouble teachers mainly are what we've given a little acronym to, TOOT, which is talking out of turn, which means talking when the teacher doesn't want them to, yelling out to other kids, answering when the teacher hasn't invited them to answer, things like that. And the other one is hindering other children, getting out of their seats, interfering with other people's work, turning round and talking to them, and so on.
And find last night's homework. Come round and see what you've done.
Okay, so what we're going to be doing is travelling around Europe for the next few weeks. If you look at lesson 1.
Can anybody tell me a seaside resort?
Blackpool.
Get off!
What, me? Sir. Sir.
Yeah, carry on.
Sir.
Right.
This, I don't know what I have to do next.
Bottle of nice big Diet Cola.
Help yourself. Give it to me.
Come on.
Some teachers engage in constant nagging, don't do this, come here, stop that, and so on. And this wears the teachers out, of course, but it doesn't actually produce any good effect on the pupil's behaviour.
Take your jackets off, the lesson's started now. Jackets off, come on. Quick, take your jacket. Lorraine, don't swing on your chair, please. Holly, sit down and take your jacket off straight away. Do you need some paper? Put that away now. Come on, the lesson's started. You're just chatting, aren't you? Now, do you need some paper?
Yeah.
You're revolting. Spit that into the bin straight. Oh, put it in the bin straight away. Now, come on, move. And I thought I said to take your jackets off. Did I say that? Right, come on.
What we try to do in positive teaching really is to encourage teachers to be more positive towards their pupils and less negative. In other words, to change what we call their response ratio. More positive, less negative. Now, we never say don't ever be negative. We think that's impossible. But what we do say is try to be much more positive than negative. Then, when you do need to be negative, it's much more likely to be effective.
Scott! I've just had about enough of you messing up my lessons. It's the same thing with you lesson after lesson, isn't it? You're just spoiling it for everybody.
It is much better for them to be much more observant and vigilant, to see when children are doing the things that they want them to do and to pay attention to those instead, and thereby encouraging those behaviours and increasing them. I suppose if you wanted to sum it all up, you could use the phrase catching pupils doing the right thing is what we're trying to encourage. Because there's no doubt about it that teachers and parents, come to that, are very good at catching children doing the wrong thing.
Positive teaching, the whole approach of positive teaching, is very concerned with close examination of behaviours in the classroom, whether they're positive or negative. And the positive teaching philosophy says that if you are able to observe very objectively behaviours in the classroom, then you are more able to change them, particularly when you have your aims in changing them clearly focused in your own mind.
The group discuss why they might want to change pupils' behaviour in the classroom.
Can you give examples?
Oh, it's when, say I'm teaching, trying to get a point across, and, you know, somebody's talking about neighbours or something. You know, what did you see what happened last night? Just totally inappropriate time.
You could include in it, I suppose, when you set some work, there would be a couple of people just chatting away instead of even paying it the slightest bit of attention to what the task in hand.
Right, Chris, so one of the differences is there is warmer. What other difference might there be? What other difference might there be?
I find that they hinder each other once I've stopped talking. I can introduce a lesson, I can tell them what I want them to do, and they'll sit there and listen to me. But as soon as I put the onus on them to actually do something, then they'll start pinching each other's pencil cases, or they'll start flicking each other with rulers, or whatever.
I think the worst thing is, say when a child has come along to your lesson without the proper equipment, you know, with a pen or pencil, you know, I know it's stupid, but that causes hindrance to other kids.
In what way?
Well, the fact is, oh, have you got a pencil? And they haven't. So, or so-and-so over there has got one. So, oh, can I get... And you sort of, then you take 5 minutes, sort of, and the pencil isn't sharp and everything like that. That can cause a lot of hassle.
To take up another point that was made, you also get a few cases of children that are sitting next to each other, and one will prod the other one, and then the other one will stab him back, and then it escalates from there. So their concentration's gone from the work they're meant to be doing, and they're more concerned with each other, and how they can physically danger each other.
How do you deal with that?
I give them a good slap.
A survey conducted for the Elton Report showed that each day 53% of teachers had to deal with talking out of turn, 26% with hindering other children, 25% with calculated idleness, for example, not having a pencil, 14% with out-of-seat behaviour. Over a week, these percentages increased dramatically. Dealing with all this inappropriate behaviour reduces the amount of time children spend learning and teachers spend teaching. The group at Rains Park move on to discuss how they deal with misbehaviour.
What I normally do is just stop talking and look. And then they sort of, sorry, miss.
So what we're going to be doing over the next few weeks is actually looking at Europe.
What I tend to do is either raise an eyebrow but carry on talking, or move towards them and maybe just put my hand on their shoulder or something in that way, and then I can carry on again. But I really try not to make it such a big thing, because then that disrupts the rest of the lesson.
Alison, what about a few on gesture?
I didn't have many gestures actually, but I suppose I did pointing and clicking fingers. I do that a lot. I don't actually say anything. And sometimes I just use silence, as Marion mentioned, and sometimes a large, deep sigh. Rather to stop myself saying anything I might regret. Just a little less chat, please. More concentration.
Okay, so we can look back down to page 76. B7.2 gas exchange. We've been through the first bit.
You know how I deal with it now. On a good day, I deal with it like Marion. On a bad day, I shout my head off.
Yeah, good point. Will you two shut up? You've been wittering all lessons so far. Haven't got a thing done.
Sorry, Sam.
You won't know anything more at the end of the lesson than you did at the beginning, which is very little.
And it might be a bad day if it's last lesson in the afternoon and you've been...
It could be the first lesson in the morning if it's a bad day.
What's happened about Nicola then?
We've still got a problem, haven't we?
I like an informal style. I'm more comfortable that way. But it does mean every now and then the kids will go over the top. And that can cause discipline problems. It can also be quite hurtful at times, I think.
And then we're going to look for some quotes afterwards. I'm just going to let them in first, all right?
At the end of the session, Pat invites teachers to select a class and to count the positive and negative statements they use with their pupils.
Come in. Can you make sure you get into a circle? So come in.
To help them do this, members of the group are encouraged to observe each other at work.
Chairs into a circle, please.
Anne Yeager and Peter Hoban agree to monitor each other's classes and to offer feedback, concentrating particularly on positive and negative statements.
At the start of a lesson, I wanted to do some discussion and drama work. And to do that, we usually get the chairs into a circle. That means moving the classroom around, which can often be quite a difficult task, especially when you haven't got a lot of space. But the class did it very, very well, very efficiently, very quietly. It's something that we do quite often, so they're used to doing it.
I was able to highlight the positive parts of the lesson, the fact that it was good organisation. She got them in, she just gave a simple instruction and the pupils organised themselves. I also gave her a little bit of critical analysis in the fact that she could have said well done a bit more often.
I just took it for granted, and then when they had to put the seats back to carry on with their work, I didn't praise that yet again, whereas it was done efficiently and we managed to get on with the lesson. So perhaps there are things I do take for granted, like that I could praise them for. I would be very quick to jump on them if they did it badly.
Watching a colleague at work and being watched oneself is one of the best ways of setting about improving classroom skills. It works best if the teachers concerned are a similar age and have similar experience. Using a checklist can help focus attention. Confidentiality, of course, is vital.
It better be good. How many times did I make negative response?
You didn't. I didn't hear it.
I must have been in a very good mood.
Then it's Peter's turn to be observed.
If we're talking about wind direction, do we talk about the direction in which the wind is blowing or the direction in which the wind is coming from? 99% of your teaching time, you're going to be in the classroom on your own. Every now and then, if somebody comes in and actually watches you and gives you a bit of feedback on how your lesson has gone, it just makes you sort of stop and think about what you're actually doing.
Considering that they're a mixed ability class, that obviously makes you a very busy person, because you have to spend your whole time moving around, which you did do, which was really important because it was obvious that some children needed much more direction than others.
Both teachers noted that whereas they tended to offer praise for academic behaviour, good behaviour tended to be taken for granted.
We've got one table and one diagram.
And generally, I mean, I think we could just have, praised them a little more for the way they got on.
Yeah.
And also because you did swap tasks.
And they did come into the classroom very well. In one day, I've got 6 classes coming in and going out of my lesson. And I don't always think about the manner in which they walk into a lesson or they walk out.
Right, chairs under.
If they come in as a rebel, then it's harder to get their attention. And yes, you're right, I should have given them a word of praise or, given them a pat on the back for the way they responded to the situation, because they came in keen to get on with the work and it didn't have an adverse effect on them.
Research has shown that teachers spend more time commenting on academic work than social behaviour. 60% and 40% respectively. However, when we look at approving comments, we find the ratio heavily weighted in favour of academic work, 45% as against 10%. With disapproving remarks, the opposite was true, 15% as against 30%. Secondary school teachers are not quite as positive as they believe themselves to be. So why do teachers respond so negatively? In the next session, the group had a number of ideas.
Alison, start with you and Chris.
I give most of my negative response, I think, when I am ill-prepared for my own lesson. If I haven't had a chance to really thoroughly go through the material that I want to present and I'm not getting it over properly, it creates sort of an agitation within myself which then rebounds on the children because I'm snappy with them.
Marion?
Stress. That's when sort of, I was saying the other day, when you get into school and the phone's been ringing for you and then the child's outside the staff room and then somebody else wants you to do something and then something else happens, you have to sort out a problem and then you have to go and teach. And by that time, you're sort of feeling that you've done half a day's work and, oh God, and that's when you sort of think, right, I want to growl here. So you do.
Perhaps a lack of recovery time between lessons. If you've got 2 lessons following immediately after each other and you've had a bad lesson for whatever reason, and the next mob of kids come trooping in, then you're still feeling the effects of the previous lesson and you take it out on them. This is in some way where you could feel sorry for the children, because if they're in a bad mood, it's just tough.
Yeah.
You know, the teacher's not going to take that into account, but if the teacher's in a bad mood, they're the ones who suffer.
Chris?
It's easier. And sometimes, particularly at the beginning of a lesson, when you're trying to establish where everybody's up to and what they're doing and introduce new stuff and things, it's just so much quicker to shout, you know, sit down, take off your coat, rather than to go around and positively encourage that child to do what you want them to do, as opposed to just say, do it.
Shirley?
We thought it maybe just habit. It's how we were all treated at school, and sometimes you don't really think very deeply. It's how you expect teachers to behave. It's how you always have behaved.
Yeah.
You expect to reprimand pupils. You know, people
You
say,
do?
yeah. I mean, if I'm chatting to a conversation or having a chat with somebody who isn't a teacher, and they find out I'm a teacher, say, "Oh, I bet you tell the kids off." It's expected of us to actually have a go.
The traditional argument is probably the strongest. It's the way what we've experienced ourselves as children.
Yeah.
And I think also been perpetuated by colleges of education. You know, we weren't told any different. And probably the biggest influences on you when you are learning to teach are the people you do teaching practices with. And it, you know, traditionally it's been the people with the strongest voices and most aggressive and powerful who have been the most effective.
Yeah.
Or traditionally thought to be the most effective.
I'm just thinking to the traditional advice, you go in hard and you don't smile.
That's right.
Or
Yeah.
approach anybody for a half a term. Yeah. So, to lead on from here, I think to take the idea that we would like to be predominantly positive, then we'd like to try and reduce the number of reprimands that we make. And then we might see that they're more effective. If we rarely use a negative comment in a predominantly positive teaching situation, we might find that our negatives have, yes, they do work quickly, but we might find that they work for a longer period. They might become more effective totally.
I'm fairly noisy in my science lessons, like, and I'm always getting told to be quiet or something. But if I had a reasonably quiet lesson, then and my science teacher said like, "Oh, well done, you behaved well this lesson." I think the lesson after that, I'd start getting quieter and quieter.